The state capitol, and we are here again, joined live by Governor Dannel Malloy. Governor, thanks very much for joining us again for another exclusive edition of Ask the Governor.
Fifth time.
It is the fifth time.
It's becoming a regular thing.
It's becoming a regular thing. It is. Before we get to the viewer emails and questions, I do have one question of my own that sort of is one of the stories of the day here at the state capitol. A group of several state lawmakers from around the state gathered over at the Legislative Office Building today and said that in the aftermath of the U.S. Justice Department investigation into racial profiling in the police department in East Haven, that you should allocate funding for enforcement of the Racial Profiling Prohibition Act, which has actually been on the books for over 10 years, and they say has been routinely ignored. According to their own survey, only 27 police departments are complying with it. It requires police departments to register and report the racial makeup of the people they stop on traffic stops around the state and turn them into the state, that there's no funding for it, and that it's being routinely ignored. I know you've received their letter. What's your response to it?
Well, not only did I receive the letter, I responded to it, and I happen to agree with them. The idea that that law was never enforced by a prior administration is unacceptable. 12 years ago, this coming Martin Luther King's birthday, I signed as mayor of Stamford regulations that outlawed on a local basis profiling. We reported, at least internally within the city. I did that with Chief Esserman, by the way, who's now the chief in New Haven. Very proud of that record. So we're going to enforce this regulation, and it's highly appropriate that we do.
What about the money? They said it could cost between $500,000 or $1 million to administer it, collate all the information, and
well, let me be very clear. I don't want to spend $500,000 collating information. We've got to find a better way to do it than that, and we have to hold local communities accountable for appropriate reporting. That's their obligation. They should comply with the law. We'll find a way to do it on a shoestring budget, but we're going to do it.
Let's get to the questions here from our viewers. We turn to the income tax, which is always a popular question on this show. We've received many calls and emails on this particular subject, and actually you and I did a story together on it a couple of weeks ago. Let's listen to this question from Debbie in Milford.
I work in a hospital where I've been employed for 25 years. Many of us have variable paychecks and receive a bonus for working nights once a year. Many of us have received either 2/3 of our taxes being taken out of our pay, or have received zero pay for the week. There should be some kind of law on the books that only a certain percentage of taxes can come out of any paycheck so that people don't receive pay checks that are zero, or in cases where you've worked overtime for the holidays, you get your paycheck and there's only $200 there out of a $3,000 paycheck.
Now, this is the over-withholding issue that we talked about here on News 8 a couple of weeks ago, and we've gotten lots and lots of letters, emails, and phone calls about this.
Well, first of all, let me say I'm sorry. I actually have a sister-in-law who fell into the same category, worked a whole bunch of overtime and got penalized. When you scratch the surface, what happened is a bunch of pay services didn't do their job. And they didn't calculate the taxes properly.
People who prepare our payroll.
Most payroll in the United States is prepared by third parties.
Right.
There are companies that charge your employer a fee to do the paycheck and the payroll. Most of them, many of them, messed up. And they were paying catch-up, and they should have made the adjustments to the system going all the way back to July, and they didn't. And you know, listen, as governor, I apologize that those mistakes were made by those independent services that, quite frankly, are paid a lot of money to get it right, and they got it wrong. But I certainly hear what was said, and you know, we should do whatever we can to make sure that we hold those folks accountable and make sure that they don't repeat that kind of behavior in the future, if that was ever to be the case.
Right, but that would only happen again if there were another retroactive income tax increase in the future.
Yes.
Right, so, but again, Kevin Sullivan, the commissioner of the Revenue Department, told me that they had given instructions to them, but in some cases they just ignored them.
Yeah, that's what happened. And again, you know, this issue of income tax, we pay income taxes on a 12-month basis. That's what is difficult. But listen, these agencies had more than enough time to correct these mistakes well before the end of the fiscal year.
And again, they're not state agencies, they're independent contractors.
Independent.
Okay, let's get to our next question. It's on the state's storm response. Megan from Brantford asks, what steps can the governor's office take to ensure that communication between the utility companies and town governments happens efficiently so that when we get slammed with another storm, the recovery effort doesn't take so long?
Well, first of all, I'm going to hope we don't get slammed with another storm this year. I mean, we all in Connecticut, we had the worst winter, the worst summer storm, the worst winter storm, all in the space of 11 months. A lot of improvements have already taken place, and we're going to push the envelope on the communication side. As you know, I don't shy away from communicating, and that's why I did twice daily updates. In many of our communities and towns, the system that the utilities had set up to communicate did work, and in some of them they didn't work. In a number of our communities, they've gone off hardwired phones to voice over internet. Well, when the electricity goes down, voice over internet goes down, and that created a problem. So we're looking at all of that. We're going to get the two-storm panel report next week. We got the WIT report. We're already working on improving communications between agencies and not-for-profits, including the municipals.
There were a number of cases where the utility companies actually said during those two-storm committee hearings that they were surprised at how well that the cities and towns were able to gather information better than their own people, and perhaps they should have known that.
Yeah, I wasn't surprised. I mean, you know, state government, municipal government employ a lot of people. And I think that the mistake that the utility companies that they did make was not to rely on the information that was available to them from state government and local government. It was almost as if they didn't see it themselves, it wasn't the case. And in many cases, indeed, what they were being told was absolutely true. In a couple, because I experienced it myself, it wasn't quite 100%, but it was 90 or 80.
Okay, we've got another question now. This one is from our News 8 Voice of the People hotline. Ringo from Cornwall is asking about the state workers accused of stealing from the storm food aid program.
Yeah.
Let's listen.
I just wonder how come these people that work for the state and got their food stamps for the storm aid, how come they still have a job? My friend got caught with the food stamp fraud and they put him in jail. I just don't understand this.
Well, Ringo, your friend who went to jail for committing fraud probably went through a trial and an investigation, and that's what we're not in the trial phase, but we're in the investigation stage. I don't think there's ever been a state investigation of employee fraud that has gone as rapidly as this one. We are fully cooperating with state agencies, federal agencies. I'm talking about prosecutors. We're doing our work and reviewing files, and let me assure you, Ringo, that the people responsible for this behavior will be held accountable.
Okay, I think we have another question on this. Pat from Meriden also has a question about the DSS case. Let's listen to this one.
There are reports that the DSS people manipulated the financial information that these employees gave them. So let's hold everybody responsible. I don't think anybody should lose their job, especially in this time, but I think they should be required to pay back whatever they got.
All right, there's really two questions there, and actually the first part we reported here first on News 8 about one of these employees who's been accused saying that a DSS worker actually manipulated the information that she put on the application to force her income down so that she would qualify.
Yeah, I'm aware of that statement. I'm not actually aware of any evidence that that took place, but let's assume for a moment it did. Do two wrongs ever make a right? Do two people committing a fraud forgive one of the two?
But you assume that both people were in on it, though.
Yeah, well, that's quite clearly the case because the individual had to sign the form. So they knew what they were signing.
But they didn't know what the rules were. They assumed the person, when you go to a state agency, you assume the person on the other side of the desk knows the rules.
When they ask you, when you're asked what you make, and you, in your own handwriting, put it down, and it's less than what you actually make, or you put down that you have no money in the bank when you actually have money in the bank, you know what you're doing.
Right, and with regard...
And we're going to hold those people accountable.
Right, I think the rest of his question was, will the state at least require them to pay back whatever they got?
I suspect the state's going to do a lot more than that.
A lot more than that. Okay. Well, we obviously haven't heard the end of this.
No.
This is another exclusive edition here on News 8 of Ask the Governor. We'll have more of your questions sent in to WTNH.com and our Voice of the People hotline.
And the Governor